But some evil troublemakers among David's men said, "They didn't go with us, so they can't have any of the plunder we recovered. Give them their wives and children and tell them to be gone." But David said, "No, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us safe and helped us defeat the band of raiders that attacked us. Who will listen when you talk like this? We share and share alike, those who go to battle and those who guard the equipment. The men who actually fought for it don't want the ones who didn't fight for it to enjoy it," and it's just like, David's like, why? We're on the same side. We all benefit from sharing in this wealth. So why are we trying to create hostility here? What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so we're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 30. You'll notice I increased the font size, so yay for better readability. For context with this chapter, because we're towards the end of 1 Samuel now, so basically Saul and the Philistines are about to go to war with each other again. David had to flee from Saul to, not get killed by him. And then he wound up actually living with the Philistines and is doing so at this moment. He was actually ready and willing to fight, alongside the Philistines against Israel in this particular war. But most of the Philistine kings who aren't ruling over the region that David is part of, they don't really trust him that much. So Achish, who's the local king to David's area, kind of got overruled, and so David and his men were made to leave. Nicely made. Sternly asked to leave, I guess. So they did. And that's kind of where we have things now. We have also been told that this particular war is going to cause the deaths of Saul and his sons. Whether or not we get to that in this chapter, we'll see. But anyway, okay. Enough context. Here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 30. 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag and burned it to the ground. They had carried off the women and children and everyone else, but without killing anyone. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they could weep no more. David's two wives, Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel, were among those captured. David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Okay, so I guess, with so many people in the Philistine army going to war, that left their towns vulnerable to attack. And David's the town David was living in, Ziklag in particular, got attacked while he was away. And I guess, 3 days after it was established that he wouldn't actually be involved in the war against Israel, is when he and his men come back and find all this destruction. The Negev and Ziklag, I combined those for a second there. The Negev and Ziklag had, as it describes here, been crushed and burned to the ground, or at least Ziklag was. But it's said they didn't kill anybody, or at least maybe not the women and children. So at least the people are alive. Silver lining there. But the town itself is utterly destroyed. So they are obviously upset. David and his men are obviously upset over this. And his men are kind of threatening a mutiny. Threatening to kill him because it was his leadership that brought them there, first off, and that led them to go with Achish with the idea that they would fight against Israel. So, especially after that whole situation that could be highly questionable to the other men, they're not so sure that they want to keep following David's leadership here. But it says David found strength in the Lord his God. Strength to do what? Not sure. Maybe we'll find out as we keep reading. So, then we get to verse 7. Then he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it. Then David asked the Lord, "Should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them?" And the Lord told him, "Yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you." So David and his 600 men set out, and they came to the brook of Besor. But 200 of the men were too exhausted to cross the brook. So David continued the pursuit with 400 men. Okay, gonna pause there for a bit. So David asks God, okay, what do I do here? Do I take revenge on these people who have raided our hometown and destroyed it? And God says go after them. Not necessarily fight them. That's not in the wording here. But God says go after them and you'll get everything that was taken. Which would be at least the women and children, maybe some other possessions and things like that too. So they set out. David had 600 men in total under his command. But some of them were too exhausted. It doesn't say at what pace they were going here, so they might have been going at a pretty rapid pace to try and catch up with the Amalekites who did all that damage. In any case, 200, it says we're too exhausted to cross the brook. So now he's only got 400 men with him as he goes to confront the Amalekites. Anyway, let me get a quick sip of water here. And then we'll continue to verse 11. Along the way, they found an Egyptian man in a field and brought him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. They also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins, for he hadn't had anything to eat or drink for 3 days and nights. Before long, his strength returned. So the Egyptian man, they're saying? I guess that could be. It doesn't even say what state he was in when they found him or what he was doing or anything like that. So maybe. Maybe he had collapsed in the field because he was so weak from hunger and thirst. But, then we continue on to verse 13. To whom do you belong, and where do you come from? David asked him. I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite, he replied. My master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick. We were on our way back from raiding the Kerethites in the Negev. the territory of Judah, and the land of Caleb, and we had just burned Ziklag. Will you lead me to this band of raiders? David asked. The young man replied, If you take an oath in God's name that you will not kill me or give me back to my master, then I will guide you to them. Okay. So, that's why there was an Egyptian right there. I mean, the way they were traveling might have been in the direction of Egypt, but I get the sense not that far. However, this guy is the slave of an Amalekite. So, he wasn't living all the way down in Egypt. And the dude obviously doesn't care for his master, because his master didn't care for him. And basically, I mean, I could definitely see him knowing the direction that the Amalekites were headed in, and maybe even the plan on where they intended to go. So I guess they're going off of that, and hoping that that can, in fact, lead them to the Amalekites. Verse 16. So he led David to them, and they found the Amalekites spread out across the fields, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines and the land of Judah. David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout that night and the entire next day until evening. None of the Amalekites escaped except 400 young men who fled on camels. David got back everything the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David brought everything back. He also recovered all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock. This plunder belongs to David, they said. So, I bet you that's a way that'll get you, or something to do that'll get you back in better graces with the men you are in charge of. You lose all this stuff, you go and get it back. Problem mostly fixed, it seems. At least the more significant part of it, because let's face it, they could rebuild the town. You can't rebuild the people like that. Also, it wasn't just that one town that was like cherry-picked by the Amalekites. It was basically that region. So as it said, it was, they took stuff from the Philistines and the land of Judah. And in fact, even earlier, the one slave guy said they raided the Kerethites, the territory of Judah, and the land of Caleb. And then they had just burned Ziklag. So, it was, yeah, it was just that, an area, multiple towns, involving at least subsets of multiple different groups of people. So, yeah, what they lost and then regained was quite a large sum. And I guess all the men after this kind of credit David with, probably at least with the idea, and also with just them getting all this stuff back. Some of which probably wasn't even directly theirs, because it was multiple towns with multiple people groups involved. So they actually maybe came back with more than they had lost. Anyway, then we move on to verse 21. Then David returned to the brook Bezor and met up with the 200 men who had been left behind because they were too exhausted to go with him. They went out to meet David and his men, and David greeted them joyfully. But some evil troublemakers among David's men said, "They didn't go with us, so they can't have any of the plunder we recovered. Give them their wives and children and tell them to be gone." But David said, "No, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us safe and helped us defeat the band of raiders that attacked us. Who will listen when you talk like this? We share and share alike, those who go to battle and those who guard the equipment." From then on, David made this a decree and a regulation for Israel, and it is still followed today. Share and share alike. Some people nowadays need to be a little better at that. That's, I gotta say, on the whole, that kind of mindset that some of his men had is one that seems to be a little too prevalent in our modern culture. It's like, if you're not with me, you're against me kind of idea. Maybe it's not exactly that, but it's like, oh, well, you didn't help me, so you don't get to enjoy the things that I'm enjoying now because you didn't help me get here. Or variations thereof. It's not just a black and white kind of thing. People kind of, have a spectrum, have different spots along a spectrum with that mindset, as with most things. But, in general, that kind of idea, though, it just pits us against each other all the more. And it means we have fewer people with resources helping fewer people who need more resources. And so more people just end up worse off. The balance of, need is thrown out of whack. And this... Americans might not like this, but this here sounds a little socialist. Not exactly, because it wasn't, although he did make it a decree and a regulation for Israel, so there might have been some government oversight into that kind of idea. Maybe not necessarily from like a really strict legal standpoint, though. I don't know. We're not given that much detail here about it. In any case, though, they have all this stuff, and the men who actually fought for it don't want the ones who didn't fight for it to enjoy it, and it's just, David's like, why? We're on the same side. We all benefit from sharing in this wealth. So, why are we trying to create hostility here? So, then we get to verse 26. When he arrived at Ziklag, David sent part of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends. "Here is a present for you, taken from the Lord's enemies," he said. The gifts were sent to the people of the following towns David had visited: Bethel, Ramoth Negev, Jatir, Aroer, Sifmoth, Eshtemoa, Rakal, the towns of the Jerahmeelites, the towns of the Kenites, Hormah, Bor Ashan, Athak, Hebron, and all the other places David and his men had visited. A lot of proper nouns in there. I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciations of. So, yeah, this was where all the wealth came from. So it was quite plentiful. So David not only, decides that this wealth should be shared among his own men that he was in charge of, but also among other people in Judah, which, mind you, is where he fled from so that he didn't get killed by Saul. But the people that kind of still liked him in that area, he sent some things. Some of these towns were, I think, Israelite towns. So it also makes some sense in that way, potentially, that these resources were shared a bit with those people, perhaps even returned to them. But I think that's about all I got for the chapter, so, long story short, David's hometown at this time gets raided. He goes and takes everything back, and more, and decides, no, let's not be selfish with it, let's share it, and bless each other and those around us. Alright, so I guess it was kind of an extra good thing that David didn't wind up being part of the main conflict between Israel and the Philistines, because he wound up actually being able to track down the people who raided Ziklag. I'm not sure he would have been able to do that otherwise. So, yeah. And of course, the first reason that's good is because then he didn't have to fight, like, his own people. So, yeah. Even though he was raring to go, God had other plans. Even through, you know, the judgment of the other Philistine rulers. But anyway, so yeah, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this anywhere else, give me a follow or whatever you gotta do for that platform. Make sure you look down on the description for info on social media pages and all that good stuff, all the different links to find and follow me. And, of course, down below that, leave comments with any thoughts you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.